Very happy to be here. I'm pleasantly surprised. I thought when I came to this meeting, PDA, I'd be mauled. I thought it was Public Displays of Affection was the group. But I'm glad to know that it's like-minded progressives. So I just wanted to kind of give some framework where we might put our hats on a hook and really understand this in concrete terms, how it affects people. So I was going to share a story of how I got involved in CORE and how I became a union activist, and it deals with Renaissance 2010 in a very intimate way. So I had gone to Whitney Young High School as a young man, and I was very pleased with my education. It was fantastic. You know, likes of Michelle Obama, all kinds of civic leaders come out of there. Rudy Lozano Jr. was just a year ahead of me. He's running for state legislator now. And I decided to become a teacher. And I decided, you know, I didn't want to go back to a Whitney Young, a selective enrollment high school, where the best and brightest are creamed and concentrated and given all of these benefits and advantages. I wanted to go where my brothers and sisters didn't have those opportunities. So I went to Englewood High School, which in the 80s had been labeled the murder capital of the country, the community, that is. And what I found was very disturbing. You know, I found students walking the halls at all times of day, very lax security, even though we had 2 full-time police officers and 13 other security personnel. I found, you know, a place that was just riveted with chaos. Right before I began, a student, Maurice Davis, who was a star basketball player, had been murdered on school grounds. I found totally incompetent administration and teachers who were fearful about speaking out, teachers who didn't really want to do that extra work because they knew at any given moment the axe could come down, and why do extra work when you're not respected and not appreciated. So there was I started in 2003, 2002, 2003. So essentially what occurred is Duncan labels Englewood a culture of failure. In 2005, we're attacked. He's CEO of the public school system, and the school is attacked as having low test scores, one of the highest dropout rates in the city, and terrible attendance. And he calls us a culture of failure. The kids are devastated. They see it all over the newspaper. We begin to organize to try and preserve our school. Finally, teachers start getting a sense of pride. Many of our staff were black veteran teachers who came from the community, had lived in the area their entire lives, and were giving back to students who they felt deserved and needed mentorship. One of the people who I actually replaced became the dean of students, and I moved in his position. And what he had told me, he had gone to Englewood in the 50s. Older black man, Napoleon Montgomery, was the basketball coach, brought Englewood basketball team into the state finals. You know, tremendous story, revered by practically all the students in the building. And what he had said is, in the 50s, there were 3,000 students in Englewood. 3,000, all black students in Englewood. There was one full-time police officer, no security guards, no metal detectors, and off-campus lunch. Students could walk and go to restaurants. By the time I was there, in the last years when we were being phased out, we had somewhere in the area of 600 students. And like I had told you, we had 13 security guards. We had high-tech cameras, which we were using poverty Title I funds to support and fund. And we had 2 full-time police officers. So what happened? Was it a culture of failure that happened? Or was it systematic marginalization and neglect of a community? And I would definitely encourage you to think about the latter. What happened between the 50s and today? And do they ever talk about this? Do they ever take responsibility for what happened to these children and their families? So what was the union response when we get targeted? I'm the union delegate. I'm a new guy. Nobody wants the position. They don't want to do that extra work. They're like, you take it. We don't want to get hassled by the administration. And by the way, the first time I'm ever called, like, I figure my days of getting called down to the principal's office are over. But sure enough, I start teaching at Englewood, start questioning ROTC programs, bring in a veteran who talks badly about ROTC, and we get on the news, and the principal's calling me down in the office the next day. So how does the union respond to this attack on union teachers, veteran teachers, teachers who have dedicated their lives to this profession? Well, Ted Dallas, our former vice president, says to me, as we meet with the entire staff, look for another job. I'm like, flabbergasted. What? You're my union officer telling me we're not going to fight this? I mean, what about this Fresh Start program you guys go on and on about? Where you're trying to salvage schools. He said, sorry, man, I'm just being honest with you. Look for another job. We fight. We bring buses. We force the union to give us transportation. We go to these hearings. They're nonsense hearings. The hearing officers are being paid by the Board of Education. They don't listen to us. They don't care. We go back to the school. We demand a meeting with Duncan. He finally relents, comes, and we get up. We're starting to kind of protest while he's there. And Marilyn Stewart, our union president, says to me, you need to sit down. You know, you need to not fight these people. Aren't you worried about your job? So there's this lack of fight. In the biggest local in the city, we've lost 6,000 members since this nonsense began, and it shows no sign of relenting. A charter law has just passed. They've more than doubled the number of charter schools, and we're set to, totally lose this battle and become a minority group within the Chicago public school system as union teachers. So I'd like to just pop this last balloon before I pass it on to questions, and that is what Duncan keeps referring to in his latest iteration as the Secretary of Education as dropout factories. So it comes to this skilled job myth, skilled education myth, that as long as we turn around these schools, just switch around their parts, all of a sudden students will be bestowed with these wonderful, amazing gifts where they can go out into society and achieve. What he fails to discuss are things like what's happening to GM right now, right? Here's a company going to Mexico, going to China, and hiring workers that have less education than the workers who are here in the United States. So there's a lot more complication to this question than is being interrogated at the moment. And the last thing I'd like to mention is the turnaround farce. So Duncan wants to turn around 5,000 schools nationwide where they fire the entire staff, fire the administrators, fire the cafeteria workers and janitors, and bring in all new people. And this is a farce for three very simple reasons. They exclude the major constituents in education: teachers, students, and parents. These are the people who should be in charge of our policy. These are the people who should be making the choices about what happens in our schools. Instead, it's these business types. And in the turnaround system, you can see in Chicago at Orr High School, which they've turned around like 3 times in the last 12 years. At Orr High School, I got a leak from a friend who works there that they have the worst freshman on track to graduate rate. They have the worst attendance rate for freshmen in the city. But they've held that information in a tight-knit fashion so that it's top secret. Because what would happen if Duncan's 5,000 new turnarounds were to reveal this disaster that's happening in Chicago, that they don't really do what they claim to be doing, that the promises aren't being delivered? What would happen if this was revealed? And why has this not been interrogated and discussed? Why is this not a viable debate in the nation's capital? So I think the challenge for public education is a challenge to all progressives because, as Karen and Noreen have pointed out, we're being the scapegoats for problems that are much larger, that are much more fundamental to the schisms in society, problems that have been neglected for far too long by the people who occupy the bastions of power. And unless we find a way to link these issues and collectively refuse to allow the dialogue to continue as it has, we will be that next group attacked, defeated, and then they'll come for you next. So we really, as CORE, believe in this idea of partnerships, and I think all of the arguments so far back up this view that we need to do this together. Thank you.